Hello, everyone, and welcome to Management 3064, Cornerstones of Entrepreneurship. I'm Ron Poff, and I'm the instructor of this Summer 1 session of 2019. Just want to welcome everyone. This first module is really kind of looking at the introduction, right? Looking at the challenges of business model design. And really, this course operates as a business of startups, right? So this is an introduction for that, and really kind of looking at the development and application of various business concepts. The goal here is to have some managerial skills to look at scalable business models for entrepreneurship ventures. Now, I always say that we think of entrepreneurship as startups, which is primarily where our mindset goes, and I think that that's important. The other part of entrepreneurship, though, is working within organizations, right? So actually, this first slide is an excellent example where you kind of have the old General Motors and the business model, and then you got this wheel of turning for new ideas and innovation and things to go. And I kind of want to make sure that when we go through the journey of this course, we really are focused on a mindset of starting something new. Again, whether that's a startup or internally within an existing organization, right? So as the course goes along, there's definitely different types of materials that we'll be using to sort of learn and introduce different concepts and various ways of learning, whether it's brief lectures, cases, concept, and virtual simulations, along with various articles. All of these really just trying to help us get a learning of new skills and concepts. Okay. Through this first module, and as we go through the introduction, really looking at commercialization. So the objectives, of this first module is really kind of looking at new products and services, looking at different strategies, right? And that's what I love about going through the Harvard Business Review and the HBR simulations, is that we can kind of look at ways that other organizations and the effectiveness or ineffectiveness in some cases of how they have resolved common problems, right, within startups and startup processes. The other part is looking at different ways from an innovation, in different scalable components, to really help us innovate business models. I would say that business models have changed certainly over the last 5 to 10 years, but quite frankly, even over the last year or two. So this is a constant learning exercise for all entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial type of communities and cultures. So with that, let's jump right in. And one of the things that we sort of all focus on when we're looking at entrepreneurship, there's this myth of the heroic founder, right? And we sort of elevate that founder into a certain area that no one else could touch, right? They've created something beyond anyone else. They were the first to do something or the only person to do something, and we sort of set them apart from everyone else. I think that's a big myth, right? So, right on the screen right now, we've got, the story of Mark Zuckerberg, the movie that came out a few years ago. And certainly if you've seen that movie, obviously going through the process of creating Facebook was more than just one person, right? It was more than just Mark Zuckerberg. And if we look at other types of founders, whether it's, again, someone like Elon Musk, who we'll talk a little bit more about in a second, who's now in his 40s and has been, kind of around entrepreneurship for a long time now. Steve Jobs at Apple, we all certainly know that, or, even Oprah Winfrey and her journey into entrepreneurship in many different ways, some failures for each and every one of these, right? along the ways, and being able to understand what those failures look like, learning from those failures, pivoting, and then creating something else. But one thing that holds true of all of these examples is the fact that it takes more than one person, right? It takes more than a dream and a vision. And it really, people have to step back and evaluate processes, right? Have to look at products, have to listen to customers, understanding. So many times, these particular founders and many others have gone into this entrepreneurial world that we all kind of look at with assumptions. And many times those assumptions failed, and they had to really kind of step back. Very humbling experience. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I've been in the entrepreneurial community for the last 25 years, both as an entrepreneur as an entrepreneur. And the interesting thing is that when we go through this cycle and learning through product development or business development, we do find that in many cases our assumptions were just completely false. And so that's going to be the brilliance of this particular course as we go through each module and really sort of establishing what areas can we further define what we're trying to do, who we're trying to talk to. Apple we just talked about. So, we sort of look at Steve Jobs and, kind of what he has accomplished at Apple. You go back, quite frankly, into the mid to late 80s, I believe, as I was leaving high school, entering into the military and on into college. I always remembered seeing these big, bulky machines, right? And that was an Apple computer. And quite frankly, they were not the design of them sort of turned me off. It seemed like it was a very eccentric and unique piece of equipment, and really just was not connected to it. And if anyone knows the Steve Jobs and Apple story, he actually, started the company, kind of went through it, but through many different reasons, he was let go. He was actually fired from the company that he founded. And you talk about humble, right? That would have to be an incredibly humbling moment. Certainly, he kind of stepped back, regained his focus, sort of saw a different methodology that he needed to adapt to. Keyword adapt, right? And so he went back and really sort of took Apple to a whole nother level, right? And so, here this particular slide just kind of shows the different types of ecosystems and the different elements of the Apple ecosystem, if you will. And this notion that Apple got to where they needed to be with no challenges and it was easy. Look where they are today is just a false notion. Really going through many different types of partners. If you look at the devices, 2008, 2009, the introduction of the iPhone, and then the iPhone 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're up to the iPhone 10 now. All of that is an iterative process. All of that is working with the customers, working with innovation, working with the market, kind of where do they want to go. But I would say, too, this integration of all of these different tools and technologies, the various platforms, really helps Apple, from a sense of business and growth and where they want to go. But at the end of the day, for Apple, there had to be a business model, right? So we can share this slide, we can show all the different areas and quite frankly, the leaders in many of these different areas. But at the end of the day, there is a business model for the corporation, strategic plan, business model for the various products whether it's the iDevices or content platforms, hardware, there is certainly a business model, right, to be able to look at where they want to go, who they want to talk to, and how do they want to do it. It's incredibly important for us to realize the significance of that. As we move on, I think the other part of this, and this is what the authors of our book for this particular session, if you look at what John Mullins talks about in getting to Plan B in that introduction standpoint is that persistence is a very important attribute, right? As a matter of fact, it's persistence over genius. So you could have an incredibly intelligent, smart, well thought out product from anyone within the business community or the scientific community or an industry, right? But at the end of the day, if they don't have persistence and a willingness to change, right, and a willingness to adapt to, there will be continuous failures. I mean, one of the things I think it's important to understand is it takes, or many times it takes 50 new products to get to the one right product, right? And we've got right here in quotes because obviously right is a perception, number one. Number two, there is a constant and continuous change to right to always grow. One of the things that we have to keep in mind, and as a marketing professional, so my background and graduate work has been in marketing. One of the things that we have to realize as entrepreneurs and as business development is customers are never fully satisfied. Think about yourself. As you start with something, perhaps that first experience that you have, you are satisfied. But as you continuously use that particular brand, use that particular product, or as you go through a customer experience journey, your expectations typically increase, right? Think about yourself here at Virginia Tech and your first year to your second year, and perhaps many of you now are in your third and fourth years. Your expectations of your courses, the expectations of the professors, the expectations of even your classmates increases over time. Why? Because we're gaining insights and experience our own selves. And so the other thing is working with customers, we don't always know or they don't always know what they clearly want, right? So we have to always be engaged and speaking with our customers, and I think that's an important piece. One of the things as a marketeer that I really drive to is learn to listen and then listen to learn. And that's an important aspect of entrepreneurship, is really that customer discovery and then getting to know who they are and what they're about. The other part is our competition, right? We have to recognize and obviously understand the landscape of our competition, not only who they are, but what are they doing? I mean, how are they adapting not only to us, but to the market, to geopolitical or the economy? All of these things we have to be aware of, pay attention to, and really understand that. The other part that really is the unknown. One of the big unknowns is really technology, and what's possible out there. And so as an organization, right, and that's what I always say is you can't be a Superman or a Superwoman or a Wonder Woman in this entrepreneurial community, right? It takes more than one person to create something great, right? And so when we looked at the heroic founders earlier, keep in mind there was an organization that they ended up creating. So it was more than just one person. And this right here gives us a great example of why that's important, okay? Someone has to be focused on technology and where it's going to go. Who's focused on the customer? And if that is one person, they're going to be really overwhelmed at the end of the day. As I mentioned earlier, Mullins talks about, right, PayPal. And PayPal was Plan G. So many of you probably have heard of PayPal and or have used PayPal, right? Whether you're paying one another or you've paid paid an invoice for services. I actually we use PayPal at my organization to pay different suppliers and vendors in some cases. And it's, when you look at an organization like that, you think, wow, they probably got it right the first time. And so it wasn't right the first time, nor the second time, nor the fourth time or the sixth time, right? PayPal was Plan G. And it's very interesting. And you look at, who emerged out of PayPal, and it's our good friend Elon Musk, right? So obviously, where he is today, there was certainly the learnings that came through this iterative process that we talk about within entrepreneurship of trying to get it right. And PayPal certainly helped him understand that. So persistence and understanding that your first plan is not going to be the ultimate and best plan, right? So learning is that important. And so, we're going to go through this analogy and really creating what we want is a business model that works, right? And we have to understand that, if you've ever been to practice for a sport, right, or you've ever had to study for something, there is a foundation of knowledge, but then we have to then kind of understand and pivot and go through from one idea to another. This isn't, though, just putting things up against the wall, like throwing spaghetti up against the wall and hoping something sticks. That is not what we're trying to do here. And I think that's an incredibly important part. I've been in consumer products companies and manufacturing companies throughout my career, and there are times when very smart and intelligent colleagues of mine, whether they were engineers or quality or purchasing or even CEOs and leaders of multi-million-dollar organizations, that just did that. They just threw something up against the wall and then just hoping that sticks. That's not really the scientific approach and really what we want to do. Okay, we actually want to utilize insights. We want to talk to people. We want to look at what's worked for other organizations, right? Best business practices. Kind of look at the industry and look at our competitors and really kind of have a very thoughtful, right, a very understanding approach to what we want to do, and that's an important part. The key here is, and what's this look like? What does right look like? And we've got right here in quotations because that's, again, it's a perception. And so we have to sort of think about that we're never always right, and we have to go through iterative changes to kind of get there. So the iterative process is focused on learning first, right? So asking questions, going through an experimentation process, and then we go through execution. Now, with that being said, there's also this time where we can kind of paralyze ourselves. I've been parts of teams and I've been in organizations where, right has to be perfect. And that will paralyze a startup, that will paralyze an organization if that's the culture and the methodology that's used. So there has to be certainly some learnings and focused on learnings, but at some point you have to go, right? You have to execute knowing that we're going to fail. The inevitable will happen, the failure will happen, but that is okay because we're going to fail fast, right? And then we're going to learn. So fail fast, fail forward. And when we fail forward, that's where the learnings come into play. It's kind of like coming up with with a recipe, and we're going to utilize that particular recipe within this course. And we're going to look at analogs, right? So we're going to look at 4 different ingredients of this iterative process, and the one that we'll start out with are analogs. And this is, what we mean by that is using others' approaches and using others' success, right? What we would perhaps label as success, and kind of look at what did they do right, Perhaps what did they do wrong? But at the end of the day, they did something that equaled some type of success. And we want to learn from that. We want to study that, understand that, and perhaps put that in our toolbox for future understandings as we approach different things. Another one is antilogs, right? Antilogs. And that's really when companies have not done the right things, right? And that could be in many, many different ways, whether it was a financial, whether it was organizational structure, perhaps the timing just wasn't right. But whatever that is, right, whatever made them fail, let's understand that, right, and really utilize that so that we don't allow that to happen to us, right, from that aspect. The other one is leaps of faith. And what do we mean by that? As you have gone through, or as we, perhaps have gone through from an entrepreneurial standpoint, there's a lot of uncertainty. Maybe you've had an internship in the past where you've walked in, and for the first week or so, you have no idea what your role and responsibility is. You have no idea what the products or services are. That's uncertainty, right? Think about your first week or first month here on campus at Virginia Tech. Think about all of that uncertainty, and how did you navigate through uncertainty? Entrepreneurship, I don't care whether you're 18, 38, 58, or 88. Whenever you start something new, there is a lot of uncertainty, okay? And we have to embrace that uncertainty. We have to be able to have the courage to step in and say, you know what, I may not know. And we certainly do not know what we do not know, okay? And with that, we have to then utilize, right, some scientific approaches, like, for example, hypothesis. We have to be able to take what we know and then be able to talk to customers, talk to markets, network with others, and utilize that in ways that we can gain insights and be able to grow the organization, grow our venture, grow what we want to do. And last but certainly not least are dashboards. And dashboards are becoming incredibly popular within organizations. And what they do is they measure our progress. I mean, at the end of the day, here's what we want to do. We may have 3 objectives, 5 objectives, whatever that is, and we want to be able to move forward, right? We want to be able to have progress. But again, what does done look like? And then how do we want to measure that moving forward? And so we'll create dashboards throughout this course and start to look at that. Within my organization, Marball Incorporated, we use various dashboards, whether it's on-time delivery, right? We have metrics for that. How are we performing against that particular metric? Obviously another one is top-line sales revenue. And for new ventures, that's an important piece. Another one may be funding. We need a certain amount of funding by a certain date, and how are we tracking towards that? Another one could be within our organizational structure. Do we have the right amount of resources, and how are we doing at networking or recruiting and looking for those? And we want to be able to measure that and quickly, right? So that's the brilliance of dashboards, is having this brief, quick look and understand how we're progressing. As we move through an entrepreneurial venture and we're looking at ways of building our business models, there's some important things to ask ourselves. And these may seem simple, and you may think, wow, how silly is this? But I'm telling you, whether it's an infant venture, or it's a very mature company like General Motors or Ford or even Coca-Cola, these are things that various teams, right, have to ask themselves. And as a new venture, we have to be critical. Who is the customer, right? And that may seem like a silly question, but at the end of the day, it's a very important question. Who is the customer? What demographics are we looking at? It's probably not everyone, right? It's not, age 1 to age 99. There's a particular customer. Is it a business to consumer customer, or is it a B2B type of business? But very important to define who the customer is from that standpoint. The other important part is once we define who that customer is, what is it that they value? What are some of their pain? What are their troubles? What keeps them awake at night, right? Where do they want to go? And these are always great questions for that customer-facing person, whether it's a sales and marketing, or perhaps it's the founder of a venture, right? But being able to get in front of the customers, and being able to understand. And this is one of those times where you ask a few questions and I'll let them talk, right? Because they will then tell you through their narrative and through their storytelling what they value. If we're a for-profit organization, this is an important one, is how are we going to make money, right? So, profit's an important part of a for-profit organization. And how do we make money in this business? What does the revenue streams look like? What does the channel strategy look like? And certainly if we don't have the first two right, customer and value, it's going to be very difficult then to understand how we're going to make money, okay? And then last here on this particular discussion point is how do we deliver that value, right? How do we get to market? Through those means, and then what's the cost? And this is typically a stumbling block for many startups. Typically, there's this hurry up, right? Hurry up and get it to market, and typically, and quite frankly, this happens even in mature organizations. Cost is not really relevant. Just get it to market. The problem with that is, from a scalability standpoint, and obviously from a profit standpoint, so we have to look at our revenue and our cost, and we have to be cautious of both of those. And we have to be able to balance both of those in an important time. So really understanding how we're going to get there at an appropriate cost. And I would say that one of the big pitfalls for entrepreneurs is not going back and revisiting the cost. Really having a mindset and an understanding and a priority of cost going to market without slowing down, the going to market strategy. The key would be to try to maximize and optimize as best we can from a cost perspective. So the iterative process, iteration is an incredibly important part of entrepreneurship, and certainly from a business model design, this is critical, right? So, if you kind of start there on the left-hand side at around 9 o'clock on a clock, it's what to do, right? So we have to be able to confirm our capabilities. What is it that we are going to be offering, right? What is it that we're trying to solve? What is the problem, right? So, you probably have heard it before. Love the problem, okay? So that we know, and we have to be able to confirm this. The other part is where to play, right? So we have to be able to choose what our segment's going to be. Where are we going to go? I always say that we always want to boil the ocean, right? You kind of go back to that hero moment, the myth of the hero. We want our product to be used by everyone. We want it to be recognized by everyone, just like Disney, right? Keep in mind, no large company started large, okay? Most large companies started small and they just sort of built on it. And so we have to be able to choose an initial segment, typically a smaller segment, to get it right? Fail fast, fail forward, get it right, understand, and then we go into a bigger, large part of this. The other one is understanding our business model from a winning perspective, right? How do we win? So what, where, and how, these are critical. And the how is, how do we go to market? How do we, how do we grow within what we're trying to do? And so those are important pieces. Then we move down to around 5 o'clock, right, on the clock. And this is the value and the logic, and really trying to be sure that we're creating and sustaining value with our customers. And as you can see, again, this is an iterative process, right? And being able to understand that once we have insights from our customers, once we understand more of what they need and what we're trying to do, and then it's really trying to design a prototype and really go back and cycle through this again, because each time that we do this, we're learning more and more, which will then, the goal here is obviously is to raise our knowledge, raise our experience, and quite frankly, give the customer the best experience possible. Okay. The other, I think one of the other things that it's very important to know, and quite frankly, I probably should show this slide about every third or fourth class, is because on the top there is, we always think of our plans, your plans, our plans. As an entrepreneur, we see the vision. We know what we want to do. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We know what the goal line looks like, and we're going to win, right? It's a straight path. Get out of my way. I'm going to do it. That doesn't necessarily happen every time. Quite frankly, I don't know that it's ever happened, right? A typical entrepreneurial path and a typical business model path looks like the bottom part here. There's peaks, there's valleys, there's challenges, there's limitations, there are constraints, there are things that we get stubborn about as entrepreneurs. When we wake up in the morning and we look in the mirror, we may not be telling the truth to the person in the mirror, okay? And then there are different ways to accomplish it, right? So we have to be open-minded. We have to keep our mindset, certainly with that openness, that we're going to be able to learn. We got to take that defensive attitude and remove it and be able to take criticism, because guess what? If we're out knocking on doors and we're speaking to customers, we're going to hear some things that we probably don't want to hear. And those can be valley moments for us. But at the end of the day, staying focused, creating a business model, growing our network, increasing our organization, all of these are things that we probably don't know on day one, right? But as we go through the journey, we will learn, we will gain from that and be able to win. That's the goal.